I think the challenge that I have personally, my father, my grandfather pounded into me like work hard, sacrifice, stay with one company for a long time, right? All those old school values. And I listened, I took that to heart. I stayed at the last company for 22 years and kind of worked my way up. So now working from home, sometimes mentally I have a hard time with it.
Went all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, won blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. CASCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CASCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com.
Before we started talking here, you were mentioning like working from home, and that's a huge topic right now. You have a lot of people like Jamie Dimon's coming on there, like everybody get back to the office, right? And then you have other companies that saying, hey, we want to hire the best talent. It doesn't matter where you are. We can always get together. We can meet up. I can travel and see you. You can travel and see me. We can all go to Chicago, meet at the convention center and have a good time and go back to our homes and whatever. And those are bigger companies. But when you think about work from home, hybrid, return to work, like these are buzzwords now in the marketplace. You get Wall Street Journal, New York Times, get on social media every day. Everyone's talking about it. Like, what are you thinking about being in a marketplace that's so much driven towards like this old school mentality of you have to have an office and you have to have the mahogany desk and you have to have the view of the city, right? Like where you were to where you are today, like what comes to mind for you when it comes to all of that?
Yeah, when I was younger, that's what I dreamed about, right? The fancy office with the wood paneling and the three-piece suit and long days and grinding out, burning the midnight oil type stuff. And we used to wear that stuff as a badge of honor, right? I'm in the office for 14 hours today. I haven't seen my family, haven't eaten anything. And people would cheer and give you high fives. And it was never really about productivity, in my opinion. It was about self-sacrifice, right? It's like, no one's sitting there really doing anything past 5 o'clock. They're all just waiting for the boss to leave so that they can save face. And then they all leave 30 seconds later, but they're not actually doing anything. They're pretending to work, right? Running around the office with your phone and a bunch of papers and looking flustered. And everybody's like, whoa, that guy's busy. And to me, it's just, busyness is just a lack of planning. And it's a lack of taking time to figure out what the priorities are and what strategically should we be focusing time on. And I fell victim to that forever. And so if you could recoup that commute time, we're in the DC metro area, your commute could be anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. If you could recoup that time and have it be more productive towards an end goal, whether it's building a business, whether it's a company, right? Extracting more value from their employees. To me, why wouldn't an institution want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to let your people have that time to be more productive and ultimately, again, in my opinion, be happier, right? Be less stressed, less anxious, because you just have to make your way to the office in the morning and do your Zooms, but you could still help your kids get off to school, be home when they're home. I mean, for me, it's been a complete game changer. My first kid, wasn't there to pick him up from school. I was working 6 days a week. It was, all about that sacrifice mentality. So in my opinion, things have changed. I think it's based upon, though, what age you are. I think the older guys like me don't want to return back to the office, kind of been there, done that already. I logged my time and I've never been more productive. And you're able to then have a pick as you're scaling and building a company. When you're talking about a talent pool, no matter where you are, especially maybe if you're in a small market, maybe there's not a lot of talent there. So to me, it's a competitive advantage to be a remote worker from a company standpoint, to be an entrepreneur, because the talent I'm going to attract is better. The price points for those talent is going to be cheaper because I don't have to necessarily be in metropolitan areas. So it's at a lower price point. And the talent pool is better because most people want to work from home. They want to have that autonomy. They want to have that flexibility. So we position it really as an employee benefit. Candidly, it's like, this is part of the comp package. It's remote work. Here's what our expectation is. But I think you get way better candidate flow from doing that. Now if I was 22 years old and I was fresh out of college and I was building my career, I would definitely want to be in the office. I would want to get up. I'd probably want to put some nice clothes on. I'd want to be around people. I'd want to do happy hours and networking afterwards and all the things that I used to love. So I think you have to offer both and have the flexibility. We have an office. It's not a mandatory office hours. Nobody cares if you're there. What I've noticed is some people are always there. Some people are there a little bit. Some people are never there. And to have that flexibility, I think, is a competitive advantage. I think it's tough trying to take something away that they have. Like, to me, that has been a benefit. Taking it away, you're going to have fallout. So we just provide flexibility. I personally am way more productive at home, but I have the discipline to go in the office, shut the door, and get the work done. If you have a lot of distractions at your house, then I could see why going to an office would be a benefit. So, we believe in flexibility and whatever really is best for them, their family, so that they can work to their full potential and we retain them for a long period of time.
Yeah. The 22-year-old you talk about, or the young individual that's getting into this business, do they have the mentorship available to them? Because I would imagine, like, you would tell your boys, like, get a job where you can go and be around people. At some point, you'll want to work from home, and maybe it's a hybrid situation. Do they have the mentorship if they're going to go to an office? And every company's different, right? Maybe you go work for a bigger company where it is mandatory that people are at the office. Like, you look at a JP Morgan or something along those lines, right? That's different because there's so many people scattered across the world where you need some offices. Anyway, do they have the mentorship to go there, or is it really scattered? And there's other ways you can do it, right? Like, you can meet up for lunch with people, you can invite clients over, but just on that point alone, as the future of this industry is not in question, but is being talked about a lot, right? Like, who are the future financial advisors? What do you think in that regard?
It's a great question. I think that's one of the major problems, right? Because when I was coming through the system, working my way through the industry, if you had a technical question or you were just having a bad day, there was always somebody around the office to help. I would just pop my head in one of the successful advisors' doorway and just be like, hey, do you have a second? Here's my situation. And they were always very open and willing to help. And that made a tremendous impact on my career. And I don't think that young people have that opportunity because a lot of the senior people aren't there in the office. And I think that's the challenge. You have to be a lot more intentional about seeking out mentorship. Where I think my generation, we got it in the break room. I would be sitting there eating a sandwich, everybody would be around and be like, oh, what's your target market? Or, you're just kind of talking industry stuff. And every great idea I've ever had, I stole from all of those people and kind of made it my own. And so I do worry about that, right? Is it, if you're going to an office, what is the mentoring? Same thing with networking. We go to events and sometimes they're attended well, other times not so much. I think people, especially after hours, right? A lot of these groups, a lot of these associations. So when you're going out trying to meet people, I think it's more difficult to have that face-to-face interaction. You have to really seek it out and be more intentional with trying to find it. And I don't know if I would have had that foresight if I was in their shoes to be like, hey, I need a mentor, and start to try to find one. And then it's kind of a weird conversation to have, right? Will you be my mentor? And it seems like, what's my obligation to do that? How much time is it going to take? Or, am I qualified to be the mentor? Where I think just that natural, organic, being in the office is much, much easier. So I think that's a great point. I think the other aspect is everybody talks about office culture. I mean, in my old world, we spent so much time trying to build culture from, the food day of the month, it's Oreo day to support staff. I mean, we were literally just looking for reasons to get people together. And a lot of it was done after hours, right? St. Patrick's Day or, whatever it may be, we're always doing events. And I feel like a lot of times people were doing it I'm doing it because I think they want to have it done. And they're attending and doing it because they think it pleases me, right? And at the end of the day, really nobody wants to do it. No one wants to be after hours and Sometimes they do, but they don't want to feel obligated to have to do so. I remember sitting down with staff and being like, hey, you need to come to the event. And they're like, I'm busy. No, the culture, be around the team. And I was forcing culture on people. And I'd rather prefer it to be, this is a work environment, right? It's an open door policy. Here's the work, here are the core competencies that need to get done. If you want more above and beyond that, like yesterday, we did a little get together. It was like, hey, I'm going to be here. We're going to go simulator racing at 3:00. It's on me. Let's grab a drink afterwards. I'm going either way. So if you want to pop in, pop in. Some people popped in, some people didn't. And I just think it's a much better environment. If you want to come. If you don't. And I think the current work environment is, for me, the best it's ever been with the flexibility, but may not be for everyone. But I think that there are some differences in the way that you need to go about building relationships and connecting with people. And I think that doesn't probably work for everyone. I think they'd be able to extract it easier in an office environment, especially that next generation.
Yeah. Do you feel that these types of calls, we're in two different locations right now. You're in the DC area, I'm in Charlotte. We're talking over Zoom video. Like, we've actually never met in person, which is interesting, but it feels like we have, right? Because we spent a lot of time doing these calls. We've had phone calls, emails, text messages, what have you. Do you feel that this provides that to some level? I mean, in person, there's nothing better, right? Because then there's more before and after that's not scheduled out, right? It could just be impromptu. You could sit at a bar and talk about things that are going on around you. But I guess it's that flexibility, and it's something that we've never had before. Do you feel like you can build that connection this way too? Like, for example, if you're not in the office and let's say you have a group of 20 somethings that are really trying to get it done, but you're not going to be there because you got other things going on, but you can hop on a Zoom call with them, let's say, or a FaceTime call or what have you. Do you think that allows for that mentorship in a way? Or you see what I'm getting at, right? Like, what comes to mind on that?
Yeah, I think that building relationships via electronic, Zoom, whatever it may be, I think it depends on the individual. My personality, I tend to be outgoing. I'm a salesman, entrepreneur without question. And so I've been fortunate to be able to build relationships with people quickly, but I make it a point the first time that I see you to go above and beyond, right? It's a hug, it's a pat on the back, because I kind of want to solidify that bond, because I don't know that it's solidified maybe until you do have that face-to-face interaction. So for instance, whenever I'm trying to recruit an advisor or acquire a team, or I'm courting a top support staff person to eventually get them to come to AdvisorLink and partner with us, I do want to get some face time with them. I do want to have a meal with them. I want to get a cocktail. I want to get to know their spouse, because they're a key decision maker. And I want to have that relationship, not only because I think that the process along faster, but I'm in a business of trust. And, they're taking a big leap of faith, whether it's an advisor coming and partnering with us or a client opening up with their finances and what keeps them up at night financially. And so I try to make one initial contact face to face. And then from there, it's all electronic meetings. So like, I'll literally jump on a plane. We're trying to scale an office in San Francisco. I'll jump on a plane, do dinners, do happy hours, meet spouses. And then from there, I think that relationship can then be transposed to Zoom meetings and everything's fine. But I think we do have to squeeze in an initial face-to-face somewhere.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the industry as a whole, if someone's working from home, I remember my grandfather, I don't remember it, but I remember the stories of my grandfather coming home for dinner, and he was in the insurance business, worked at John Hancock, right? And he would go out and do his calls afterwards. He would go and he would sit at the kitchen table and he would talk about their family and meet everybody, right? They'd probably have dessert, cup of coffee, what have you. And you sell life insurance policies. It was all face to face, like even F2F, right? Like, and you're jotting your numbers out, how many face to face, and then you even maybe in the early 2000s, it's like, how many face to face meetings do you have? And that was going on. And I still think this is face to face in a way, but that industry of trust, like you said, so now we're talking about the clients. I guess, what does that look like when you're meeting with clients and talking about their hopes and dreams, and here's an update on your account, all that kind of stuff? Is it face to face similar to what you talked about at least one time, but everything else is going technology afterwards? Like, what does that look like?
For us, it really depends on the form of how we met them. if it's a quality introduction from an existing client, I think that the trust and the relationship kind of is transposed over to us, and it makes it a little easier when we're doing cold marketing, whether it's, online outreach or some type of strategies where we're sending out messages, or, we do a lot of workshops via Zoom. So if we're doing a virtual financial literacy class and it's via Zoom and they meet us that first way, what I've noticed is all the planning meetings can go forward, and that's just how they met us. And that's kind of what the expectation is moving forward. So it depends. But again, I think for me personally, maybe it's my own internal hesitation or, head trash. I just want to get, belly to belly, so to speak, at least one time and then never again. Right. And they don't want to come to the office. I tell my clients, you don't have to come to the office. And I can see the relief on their eyes, right? They're like, oh, thank God. It's like your dentist telling you never have to come here again, but you're going to have perfect teeth. Like, we'll figure this out. And so they don't want to come to my office. They don't want to sit in traffic. They come in, I used to be sitting in a suit. They're coming in plain clothes. To me, it's just it's a little bit weird, right? When I look back in hindsight, the way that it's all staged, and I was just doing what the people before me were doing, and now I think we kind of have a little pattern interrupt, right? With the, COVID. And I think people are kind of reassessing what things should be like, but we're just doing what they used to do in the Industrial Revolution. They kind of invented it, the work week, the attire. And now I think 100 years later, it's kind of like a reset. Like, hey, we've got technology now and we've got all these other things. Like, you're not sitting in a factory, welding things all day. Or, it could be different. And so I think that it's, I prefer a face-to-face if I can get it. But if not, I can still progress the relationship forward. But I just like to meet, hug, break bread, have a drink, and solidify the relationship if possible. I think it's better, but not necessary.
Yeah. But then each time afterwards, it doesn't have to be, let's review your portfolio every quarter to come into the office. Just like you said, you got traffic, parking, elevators, like just the whole thing. And it's the before, it's the during, it's the after. It's like an afternoon, it's a morning, it's done. And I think there's streamlining it. And it's not just streamlining it for the sake of streamlining it. It just makes for a more peaceful, restful, productive day, even though it's like there's so much in productivity. You got to be productive. You got to go, sometimes it's like maybe the productivity is like you need to take a breath. Hey, you didn't have to sit at that red light every second, right? So anyway, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So true. I think the challenge that I have personally, my father, my grandfather pounded into me like work hard, sacrifice, stay with one company for a long time, right? All those old school values. And I listened. I took that to heart. I stayed at the last company for 22 years and kind of worked my way up. So now working from home, sometimes mentally I have a hard time with it, right? It's 5:00 and it's like, okay, I guess I'm done. I'm just walking out of my office and going into the living room with the family. Or it's like, it's 8:30, but I don't have a meeting, but she's sitting at my desk, or it's 7:00 and I'm still working. So I think it's hard trying to figure out for me internally, like, I don't feel exhausted any longer. I don't feel stressed or totally anxious like I used to feel. I don't need to work Saturdays every Saturday to fit everything in, right? I would have to do that to be able to come in Monday and be productive without a ton of stuff. I don't need to do that any longer. And I think the mental paradigm shift of I'm still successful, I'm still productive is hard. It's hard for me. It's almost like I feel like in order for me to feel like I've done well from a work week, I have to be miserable, upset, and stressed out. And if not, it's like, am I not suffering enough to be successful, or am I too happy? I think from a mental standpoint, it's challenging to have that shift and still feel like you're doing what you need to do to take care of your family and your coworkers and clients, etc.
Yeah. How do you measure that then, right? Like, how do you check in? You could journal and like you had these actions, like I really wanted to get these things done and these thoughts. And it's different from a standpoint when you're running a business than if you're in sales. If you're in pure sales, it's, how many meetings you need, how many this or that you need, how many times you need to have a meal with somebody. When you're running a business, you're working on very high level tasks. These might be like $1,000, $10,000 hour type tasks. And it really didn't do anything. But I was thinking through stuff. I was strategizing this. And you could talk to a consultant, they'd be like, that's what you should be doing. But sometimes, like you said, you were in sales for so long, that's really hard to do. And then throwing in like, while I'm working from home and have these hours I'm supposed to be working, like how do you measure it, or how do you help other leaders in wealth management at AdvisorLink think through that?
Yeah, I struggle with it candidly, personally. It's just from a mental standpoint. I have to always take time and think about, here's what I did, right? I reflect back on Friday of all the wins that I had, go in Monday and figure out, here's priority, here's what I need to be doing to be able to move the needle. Some of it's, internal, some of it's external. Like I haven't seen so-and-so advisor in a while, all right? Some outreach, some making sure, again, being intentional with that relationship building aspect. But there's some days where I put in a full day of work, but don't leave the house. And I know I'm productive, but it's like, it's hard to feel always like good about that effort because I'm used to driving home and the commute, putting in 12 hours. And wasn't productive for 12 hours, but there's just a correlation in my brain that it was, all right, I suffered for 12 hours today. I then have now justified being happy for the weekend, so to speak, right? I left it all in the field and blah, blah, blah. I did everything that I can. If I could do that same 12-hour day in 7 hours, because I'm home, there's no distractions, there's no commute, I get the same done, but I have to remind myself that it's okay to not suffer those extra 5 hours. And it's hard. It's difficult.
It is difficult. Take a college kid, maybe even late high school, they're starting to think about what they want to do, what they want to major in, and maybe they're just out of college, right? That range of 17 to early 20s. And, finance is something that people still study. They want to go into investment banking. They want to go into private equity. They want to work at the big bank, right? All those types of things. Should these individuals be considering a career as a financial advisor?
Of course, I'm biased, but to me, I think it's the greatest industry. I fell into it. I was a music major. I got recruited into the business, I think like most people do. And it was made for me. And it was just like, I made way more money and had way better experiences in my early years. My learning curve was huge just because I had to figure it out. As an advisor, you got to learn the technical stuff, the marketing, client development. And I think that made me a better professional, but also a better person. I think that things are changing though. I listened to some podcasts on your recommendation, actually. And one of the guys says, All In, I think it was the one that you recommended. And I love My First Million, all those ones that you refer to, man. I listen to them all the time. And he talks about when he got out of college, going into that employee channel. I try to brainwash my kids, be entrepreneurs, right? Cantanucci's are employers. You don't want to be the employee, so that they kind of have a different lens, right? When I got us like, go to college, be an accountant, an attorney, work 100 hours a week for 30 years and, you'll be happy. And I'm like, man, that is not the path for you. Like, this is what you should do. And on the podcast, he talks about he got out of Berkeley and he never got a job. People like, you're crazy. Like, you got a college degree to be marketable, to get a salary job. And he started his own business right out of college, which most people would tell you you're crazy, right? And so his thought process was, I never want to get into that institution, and had that mentality. 2 years later, he's like, I'm in college, I'm living the life. He's like, now I'm an employee somewhere. I'm saying weird things like, I need these benefits, or I can't go to work without a pension, or he's like, once you have that mentality, it's so hard to break it. That really resonated with me. I'm having a hard time, even though I've always been the entrepreneur and the employer, I've been kind of brainwashed, if you will, of this is the way that it has to look, feel, and seem like. And it definitely does not have to do that. Now, we're now month 20 at AdvisorLink. We've had just tremendous growth, and they're doing it very, very different than I used to in my old world. And it's a very, very different model. And so I think that that's ultimately the opportunity, but some people are having trouble kind of breaking out of that because they're kind of just used to this, right? This mindset. And so I always tell my kids, and I would tell young people, like, you don't have to get into an institution and work your way through and suffer and do all those things. Like, have an idea and take it to market, whether it's a product, whether it's a brick and mortar. Like, you could do anything and be a business owner. And I just never knew that. No one ever told me that. It was, get a college education and become a white collar professional. And that's kind of what I aspire to be. I definitely do not want that path for my children. If that's what they want, I'll support it, but it's definitely not my ideal track by any means.
Yeah. And there's a lot of push in that direction, whether that's parents, other people's parents, when you go to your friend's house and the parents are like, what do you do when you grow up? Or what are you studying? And did you have any jobs? What's your internship this summer? Like, if you don't have an internship going in your junior, senior year, it's like, man, your life's that's a tough career track for you. It's anxiety inducing. And it's like, well, I think that I need to do these things. Like, well, who said so, right? Because society's telling you so. And you're in college campuses and they're telling, like, go get your internships and all this guy. I remember an internship I had. I did nothing. I did data input into this small computer. Like, I didn't even know what I was doing. Like, it didn't teach me anything about finance, right? It was just, maybe I suppose it's like, Miyagi in some regards, like you're seeing the numbers and maybe it's resonating somewhere.
That's right, osmosis.
Yeah. There's a lot in what you said too. And I'll think of this, like, I think because so many people aren't going into financial advisory services, let's say, that it's like open water, maybe. If you want to go work for consulting firms or a big financial client, you want to work at one of the investment banks, like, yeah, you're going to have to grind it out and you're going to have to prove in your internship that so if you want to do that, yes, I do think that you have to go down that path. It's like, if you want to go to med school, there's certain things you have to do to get there. It seems like, though, in financial advisory, like, they still need people to do this, right? And we can get into the great wealth transfer, which also includes the transfer of like, who's going to manage the money, not just, right, like what's going to happen, like where's the money going to go? It's like, who's going to actually be there to manage the money? And if you're in your teens or 20s, 30s, like, what an opportunity that is, because less and less people are going into that. But I don't know if it's seen as like, yeah, but that's not the best career. I don't know, right? Like, what does that look like when I throw it in that way, when you're talking about the great wealth transfer, the fact that there's not a lot of people going into this career, right? And insurance, the same thing. Like, these insurance companies used to hire all sorts of people. I don't know who they're hiring right now.
So true. I scratch my head as well, right? And these big companies, especially the product manufacturers of financial products, the advisors are the distribution channels, right? That's their sales force. And a lot of financial products, unfortunately, in my opinion, they're not bought, they're sold, right? Especially insurance. Like, it's just a reality. And so I think they're trying to figure it out. What is that distribution of the future? For us, some of the things, about the wealth transfer and some of the things that you talked about, we're in the business right now. We're buying out a lot of aging advisors. We acquire them. We buy out their businesses. We partner them with a younger advisor to help manage the wealth and continue to make good on the commitment to the clients. And so it's a great time for that. But I think that the challenge, a lot of challenges, I always compare it to when my grandfather passed away. He had his guy, his advisor at Schwab forever. He would always talk about him. I never met the guy. And when my grandfather passed, I was the executor and I was talking to the investment person, the advisor, and I was trying to transfer all the money out. And he said to me, oh, you're moving the asset. And I said to him, John, nobody knows you, respectfully. And this isn't my money. This is going into like 8 different buckets, right? There's all kinds of beneficiaries and heirs, and I don't dictate or control any of it. I'm just dissolving it and putting it to where it needs to go. Ultimately, you've got to reach out to these people and build a relationship, and you haven't done that. So I'm sure they have their own person. And that really, I always think about that. It was like, that conversation was so eye-opening to me. And so, when we're going in, we're looking to acquire and buy businesses, advisory businesses, I ask them, how many of your clients are 70 or above, right? Because ultimately, unfortunately, the clients start to die out. And then my next question is, how many of the beneficiaries of the heirs do you work with currently? And if the answer 70 over is high and the beneficiaries is low, it's not a right opportunity for us, because we're going to have a note to buy that thing out and we're not going to get revenues on eventually it's going to die, right? The business is going to die. And so that's a huge concern. So the wealth transfer, who's going to get it and then who's going to manage it? And then those people have relationships with one another. So a lot of our young advisors, if you're the beneficiary on anything, you're the executor, you're the trustee, we want that person on the Zoom. We want to have a relationship with that individual, because we're the person they're going to come to quarterback everything for the estate, right? And so It's a big part of what we do, but I don't think many institutions or advisors are doing it. And then I'm very conscious of, who is that 35, year old individual who's talented, who that we can nurture and build their technical skills and skill sets and help them build the firm of the future, because that's our legacy. I want to see this thing live on beyond me and beyond my own bandwidth, and have the next generation be able to step in and take over when I decide I no longer want to do this. It's my responsibility to groom that group of people. I meet with senior advisors all the time, or attorneys, architects, and when we're doing their business planning, their succession planning, I always ask them, who's your successor? And they're always like, well, I've got a gal or I've got a guy, they're this junior person. And I'm like, great. Tell me about the plan. And they're like, well, they're just going to take over. And it's like, well, do they have the money to buy you out when you decide to move on? They're like, no. How's that going to work then? Ultimately, you're going to have to sell to somebody that can finance the deal. Are you going to self-finance it? They're like, no, we need the money to fund our retirement accounts. The sale of the business is going to fuel the next, phase of our life. And so I think that's the challenge. That's something that we're very, very conscious of, is grooming that next generation of advisors and of clients to be able to have those relationships. And those people typically want Zoom, they want electronic means, they don't want to come into the office. And that's great. And that works very, very well for us. And so, that's something that keeps me up at night, is like, what happens if clients are moving on and we don't know who those beneficiaries are? Things start to fall apart.
Yeah. And I think that the relationships that have to be built as a result of these different connections, CPAs, attorneys, so these clients, or maybe the second generation, the third generation, they have relationships with those individuals that might not be the same individual that the father or the mother's working with, right? So then there's going to have to be some sort of connections with those individuals as well, because as we all know, a CPA can come in here and kill the deal. And they like, we have this person we want to give it to. It's very complex, right? It's not easily explained as to like what that looks like. So there's a lot of, like what you talked about before, relationship building as it comes to this, more of like a soft skill type of mindset. Because I think in finance, we see a lot of analytical skills, technical skills, and not as much on the soft side of it. So I think I would imagine, I'll ask you this, like a diverse set of skill set, not maybe for the individual, but for the team to come in there. Because if everyone's just like, they're very analytical, they can run numbers and they can do their chart, whatever they do, technical analysis, as opposed to the individuals, like who's building the relationship? Like you said before, you've said it multiple times today, like who's going out to eat with this individual? How do you piece all that together? And that ties into everything we've talked about, which is the younger individuals, because they're also being pushed down innovation, technology, learn how to do these things. And I'll throw in another element to this, which is AI, which is changing everything from, we could review stock portfolios with it. Like who's to say what's going to work better or not? I don't know. But you see what I'm getting at when it comes to all that, from the young side to managing relationships to soft skills, hard skills. Take it from there.
Yeah, I came into the business. I was a music major. I knew nothing about financial services or advisory. And when the hiring manager told me I got the job, I was almost kind of confused. I had my suit on and I did my research. I think I interview well. I'm a pretty good salesman. I put my best foot forward, but I had zero experience to speak of. And then I realized, of course, it's really a sales job, right? You're getting licensed and it's low retention in the industry, right? Everybody loves the idea of building something and the income potential and learning the technical stuff. But, you're going to go out and get beat up in the beginning, just like any entrepreneur building anything, right? You're going to bump into walls and learn through failures and make mistakes. And not everybody's comfortable in doing that. I will take the individual that has the given ability to build relationships, generate trust, right? They're very genuine and they come across as caring and they're able to go out and meet people on a favorable basis. All the technical stuff comes into play over time and it takes the pressure off of you, because anytime we're meeting a potential client, the first couple of meetings, they're just trying to get an understanding of their situation, what keeps them up at night financially. We're never going in and making a recommendation, right? Just like the doctor. You never go to your doctor and like, listen, Eric, I don't need to examine you. I don't need to know the challenges. Just take a couple of these, right? Call me tomorrow. Be like, maybe I'll get a second opinion, right? And our process should be the same way, right? You should never be leading with a product or a strategy. You don't even know that person or their situation. And so, we always talk about the art form versus the science. I think that art form is hard to train and hard to develop people in those skill sets. The science is very, very easy to develop and teach, in my opinion, over time.
Yeah. Is that like team building, which I know you've talked about, like partner with people? Like, you have someone who doesn't have the technical skills and maybe doesn't have a desire to go down that path, but are these companies that are being built with multiple people? Like, there's this scene, I don't even remember, from The Big Short, and they're sitting in there and he's trying to tell them like what's going on with the mortgage industry. And he's the talker, it's Ryan Gosling, right? He's like, that's my quant guy over here. I don't know anything about this stuff. That's the guy. So you could go to that dinner and like, here's the math guy, here's the technical analysis guy. Are you seeing it like that? Where like, you're good at this, you got the gift of gab, but the technical side, it's not coming. And not to mention, you probably don't want to stay up late even learning about that stuff. This person over here does want to do that. So you're like on a basketball court, like, well, this guy's going to score points and this guy's going to grab rebounds. Like, that works better than if you both want the ball. We only have one ball to go around. Like, how do you think about that?
I mean, if you had to be good at everything, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have made it so long in the business. I built my career off of that exact model, figuring out who has the technical skills to solve the problem that the prospect brought me, and for the better. I am never the guy who's going to sit down late at night and read the prospectus. So that is not who I am at all. I tend to jump before I look, right? And I'm just like a hard charger, burn the boats, let's go kind of guy. And I think that that's good. And sometimes it's bad. And I surround myself with like my two partners. The one guy is like technical beyond. Everything goes into a spreadsheet. He analyzes it. So like when I'm going to acquire a business, I get the gut feeling that this is good. And then I give it to the team and it's like, okay, rip this apart and tell me why I should not do this. Right. And if they can't come back and do that, then we move forward. But if they come back and say, we don't think this is good because X, Y, and Z, I'm like, that's all I need to know. I'm not going to proceed. And so I think that team is key. I think leveraging people's skill sets. Some are just natural skill sets that people have been given, whether they learn it from their family or just part of their DNA. And then some things people had to work hard for, the technical and the knowledge. But some people love doing that, right? They love digging deep in the technical specs and the strategies and tax laws and economic trends. And so there's a place for everybody. I think that if you're one thing, it's very hard to make yourself into the other thing. Figure out who's strong at the things that you don't enjoy. Not necessarily that you're weak in it, but maybe you just don't enjoy it and just don't want to allocate the time towards learning it. Outsource it. I'm a big, right now with technology, we talk about AI. Like, I think it's easier than ever to have leverage. Focus on your unique abilities. Outsource everything else as possible. Not only will the end result be better, but you'll also have a better quality of life.
Yeah. Well, there's two things. One, on the AI side of things, and you've worked for large companies where a lot of things want to be brought in-house. We'll do this. You go to the bank and the big bank's going to have they're going to have their marketing department. They're going to have every department known to man, where like you have smaller business, they can outsource so many different things is what you're doing. So you're bringing the best of all of that to the individuals, whether it's your clients, whether it's the people that you're recruiting to come to your company, and they get to see that, they get to listen to you. I think that brings more to the table than saying, well, just because this person works here, they happen to be the best. Well, why? Because they live in the same city or they're in the office? That doesn't necessarily make it true.
Without question. And I think people start to see through that, right? How can one institution have the best of everything? And so we believe in even going outside and trying to figure out ultimately what's the best fit. Sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's external, sometimes it's based upon personality as well, too, not only just technical skills. I know that if I have a super technical client, engineer, or, math professor, or whatever it may be, there's certain advisors that I think are not going to be a right fit for that client, and they're just going to butt heads. So I think from not only a skill set, from a personality standpoint, super important.
Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you about is AI as it relates to the industry. There's a lot of different things that it can do. I think there was maybe a lawsuit recently where they were predicting stocks, like, what are the top 30 stocks and what are we going to sell our clients, or what do we invest their money into, right? And they did horrible with it. It doesn't mean that other people haven't done horrible with making these types of decisions as well in the past without AI, right? Using their own technical skills or whatever way they went about making their decision. But it's definitely becoming a thing to say, well, why do I need to work with an advisor if I have these AI tools out here, I could go get a free account at a place like a Schwab and I just do it that way, right? And again, this conversation's been happening with financial advisors for however many years it's been around. AI just changes it a little bit and maybe that becomes professional. What are you thinking? What are you hearing? What are the thought process around AI as it relates to like big financial decisions?
I mean, I think it's exciting. I think we're living in such an exciting time. The technology that they're pushing out every day is just insane, and how it's getting bigger, faster, stronger so quickly. I think there's a spot for all of it, right? I think that there's going to be a segment of the market that's going to want to do that. I don't know if it's an income level or an age bracket. And I think that there's also a segment of the market who's going to want still that personal, individual attention and have that relationship and have that sounding board of an advisor and have a team approach where they have a lot of people that rally around them. I think just because somebody can do something, I don't think they're necessarily always will. Right? I always kind of compare it to, all kinds of different service providers that people use, right? Like I could probably change my own oil if I wanted to. I could probably, paint my own house or, right, I have construction guys here today. I could probably figure it out, but it's just not my expertise and not what I want to focus my time and energy on. And going back to the leverage conversation, I believe in outsourcing the stuff and focusing on what I do. But some people love to manage their own finances. Some people love, watching CNBC and Kramer and figuring out what the stock picks are, leveraging AI or some type of bot to help the asset allocation. There's all kinds of, robo advisors out there and all kinds of different platforms. And I think that there's a need for all of it. It really depends on the segment of the market. Of course, I'm biased, but I just don't know that there will be a time where a human being individual will be completely eliminated out of the process, because it is a very emotional process and it's difficult. I think not only is it technical, but it's emotional, and to have kind of like a person to sidle up alongside of you and provide advice or a sounding board, I think there's a value as well. But I think it's very exciting times. I'm building and scaling a company. The first company I started building in 2002, I had to get a brick and mortar location. I had to buy a network. I had to get the office wired for phone. I mean, it was a big outlay. You could be an entrepreneur and start a business with such little barriers to entry nowadays with technology, right? My phone system's on my phone. It's a Zoom app. My video chat is on the phone, and be able to now be in different markets because it's remote. I think it's never been easier to be a successful entrepreneur and build a business through leveraging all these tools. My son just turned 13. He's all about trying to buy a car. I'm his partner. I told him, whatever the money you have, I'll double it, but you got to save something and build it. So, now that the winter's over, he can't shovel any longer, and there's no leaves. So he's trying to figure out what's my next hustle. And we have all the, we're big car guys, so we have all the detailing stuff. Him and his buddy started a detailing company. He 3D prints. We got him a 3D printer for Christmas. He 3D prints these little tags where you just hit the QR code. It brings you to his website, which ChatGPT created. It looks like he's running a huge company. I'm like, maybe you need to tone it down a little bit. Like, let him know you're 13-year-olds and like transparency. And he went to Starbucks, put all the stuff around, and he's going this weekend to wash cars. And so that blew my mind. Like back in the day, you went door knocking. Can I shovel? Can I mow? Now through technology, they've taken it to a whole nother level. And I'm so excited to see that you take a car washing business and then take that strategy to market and get some, but it's not just local, it's the whole town. Every time I go to Starbucks, I see this little QR code thing all over the place. And I think that's exciting. That's going to open up new innovation. It's going to create new economic, environments for people. And I think what's going to come out of that long term is just absolutely exciting and spectacular.
Yeah, you're operating from a place like of abundance. None of these things, like we talk to a lot of people that they're defensive about a question like that or where that's going to go. And they're upset about it. Well, this is stupid. It's the old guard and the new way doesn't work that way. This is how you have to do it. And when you operate from that abundance, that's empowering. It's motivating, right? Because it could just make everything better. You'd be more productive. And I think that's what people want to be a part of, no matter where they are in their career, no matter how old they are, if they're coming out of college, if they've had a business for a long time, because then, it's like you think of a business owner in the financial advisory services and they're looking to like, hey, who do I partner with next? They have to see someone who's seen it this way. and who's not only like, here's what's happening today with AI, but here's the future, here's the wealth transfer, here's what that looks like, here's how we could take advantage of technology and leverage, like you said, to get to that point. So no, I think that makes a ton of sense. And so AdvisorLink, connecting with you on LinkedIn, connecting with you, learning more about AdvisorLink, where do people go?
Definitely jump on LinkedIn and check me out, advisorlink.com as well, to our website. If you have trouble sleeping, it's a great resource to kind of peruse. And that's it. I think we do most of our stuff via LinkedIn to learn about AdvisorLink and about myself as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate it, my friend.
This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.